Just days ago, Alex EALA was celebrating the biggest breakthrough of her career in Washington. She had walked off the court as a champion, climbed to a new career high ranking, and suddenly become one of the most talked about names in women's tennis. But almost nobody expected what happened when she arrived in Toronto. Before Alex even hit a single ball at the Canadian Open, fans were already creating a story of their own. Tickets for her opening Wednesday night session started disappearing fast, and what would normally be a routine early round match suddenly felt more like a major event attraction. The buzz wasn't fading after Washington. It was getting louder. Reports around the tournament pointed out just how unusual the demand was. A weekday opening night session in Toronto had rarely generated this kind of interest over the past 2 decades. Serena Williams was often cited as one of the very few players associated with a similar level of demand for an opening Wednesday night session. Nobody was saying Alex had matched Serena's career. That wasn't the point. The comparison was about fan interest, and the fact that Alex's name was even entering that conversation showed how dramatically her popularity had exploded. The timing made the whole thing even bigger. Alex came into Canada carrying momentum from an unforgettable Washington run. She had beaten major names, broken into the world's top 20 for the first time, and captured a title that changed the way people viewed her. She wasn't arriving in Toronto as an interesting prospect anymore. She was arriving as a champion, and fans wanted to see what happened next. Toronto was also the perfect city for this moment. It is home to a huge Filipino community, and many supporters had been waiting for this chance. Families planned road trips from neighboring cities. Some fans drove for hours. Others rearranged work schedules, booked hotels, and made sure they had tickets in hand. Social media filled up with people posting seat locations, organizing meetups, and getting Philippine flags ready for match night. The whole thing started to feel less like a normal first-round match and more like a celebration. For a lot of Filipino fans, Alex represents something deeper than wins and rankings. Young Filipino athletes growing up in Canada can now look at one of the biggest stages in tennis and see someone they identify with competing there. That kind of representation changes what feels possible. It makes the dream look closer. It makes it feel real. Even other players were noticing. Coco Gauff spoke about how powerful representation can be and how athletes like Alex can connect entire communities to a sport that may once have felt far away. She also described Alex as someone who is naturally easy to support, not only because of her talent, but because of the way she carries herself. And that may be one of the most important parts of Alex's rise. Her connection with fans feels genuine. Whether she is talking to reporters, thanking supporters, or spending time with young fans, she has shown the same humility people noticed before the trophies and rankings arrived. Success hasn't created distance between her and her supporters. If anything, it has made that bond stronger. Alex herself has repeatedly redirected attention back toward the Filipino community. When asked about the support surrounding her, she has often made it clear that she sees the story as bigger than one player. For her, it is also about an entire community finally seeing itself represented at the highest level of tennis. That perspective is part of why fans have connected with her so intensely. She even has a simple way of ending many of those moments, Salamat. Just a heartfelt thank you, but for Filipino supporters around the world, that word carries a lot of weight. It reminds them that no matter how far her career takes her, Alex still recognizes where she came from and who has supported her journey. But beneath all that excitement was a challenge people could easily overlook. Alex did not arrive in Toronto fresh after a week of rest. She came directly from the most demanding stretch of tennis she had ever played. Her championship run in Washington pushed her physically, mentally, and emotionally. She battled strong opponents, long matches, pressure, and unexpected delays before finally lifting the biggest trophy of her career. Most players would love several days to recover after something like that. Alex barely had time to celebrate. Almost immediately, the focus shifted to the National Bank Open, one of the biggest events on the calendar outside the Grand Slams. Travel, recovery, adjustment, and preparation all had to happen in an extremely short window. Even experienced champions can struggle with that kind of turnaround. Still, Alex wasn't making excuses. Instead, she focused on what Washington had given her, belief. She said every match taught her something and helped her grow. Rather than leaving Washington thinking only about exhaustion, she felt she had finished the week playing some of her best tennis. That confidence mattered because Toronto's field was stacked. Grand Slam champions, elite players, and dangerous opponents were everywhere in the draw. But after Washington, one thing had changed. Nobody could dismiss Alex simply because another player had a bigger ranking or a more famous name. She had already demonstrated that once the match begins, reputation only gets you so far. And then came the opening round storyline that made everything even more interesting. Waiting across the net was Alicia Parks, an opponent tied to one of Alex's more painful memories from earlier in the season. They had met months earlier in Melbourne. Alex started that match in control, producing a dominant opening set and looking like she had everything going her way. Then the momentum flipped. Parks fought her way back, took control, and handed Alex a defeat that was difficult to forget. Those losses stick with players because they reveal things victories sometimes don't. You remember where the match changed. You remember the moment you wish you had handled differently. You carry those lessons forward. 7 months later, tennis had created the perfect rematch. But this version of Alex EALA was not the same player who had walked away disappointed in Melbourne. Since then, she had improved across her game, earned important wins, developed more confidence against elite competition, and learned how to stay composed when momentum started moving against her. She had gone through difficult matches, pressure situations, and career-defining moments. Most importantly, she was now arriving as a champion. Parks, meanwhile, would not be facing the same young opponent she remembered. She would be facing a player carrying the confidence of someone who had just come through one of the toughest weeks of her career and emerged with a trophy. That is what made Toronto feel so different. On paper, it was simply the next tournament. In reality, it had become another test of Alex's transformation. Could she recover quickly enough after Washington? Could she handle the attention? Could she play in front of a crowd that seemed ready to turn Toronto into a home match? And could she use the lessons from Melbourne when she faced Parks again? By opening night, the spotlight was no longer just about rankings or the draw. It was about the phenomenon growing around Alex. Thousands of fans were coming specifically to see her. Philippine flags were ready. Chants were being planned. Supporters who had followed her for years were finally getting the chance to watch her in person. Washington introduced a new champion to the world. Toronto was preparing to show how powerful the connection between Alex EALA and her supporters had already become. And if a sold-out opening night session, massive Filipino support, and a redemption match against Alicia Parks were any indication, this story was nowhere near finished. It might only be getting started.